projects, public housing projects that used to be well located and now located in prime land. So basically this prime land has been taken over. And we are in the process, and of course there is a lot of resistance of the public housing movement and residents, and there are representatives here today that can tell you more about this resistance and what is going on. But the whole idea is trying to take over, especially public housing located in prime land, in order to develop this land to open ground for the market, for foreign investments, blah, 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 the same thing that I referred to. And you can see the same process going on in a country like Kazakhstan. And then I take an example of a country that was part of the Soviet Union. So as part of the Soviet Union or any other socialist country, it had housing in these countries was completely a basic human right, and housing was provided to everybody with different schemes. If you take the former Yugoslavia, it was more community-owned housing. If you take more Russia and the Soviet Union, is more state-owned housing. It depends, but basically people could stay there paying sometimes rent, sometimes not paying, but they could stay there as long as they live, or as long as they were living in the same city. So all of this housing stock during the transition to to market-oriented economy was basically privatized, using different schemes. In Croatia, they sold the stock in order to fund the war against Serbia. That was the main strategy. In Kazakhstan, they didn't sell. They had a lot of money with oil. They don't need money. So they just privatized, and they gave away the housing stock to the residents. But the main issue is that if you see in Kazakhstan, a new capital, Astana, that I was referring to, is exactly the same thing. State land where public housing used to be. People are just displaced, evicted from that, and is taken in order to be given to entrepreneurs to promote housing in the private market and to open ground to foreign banks in order to provide credit for the people to buy those houses. Of course, after the financial crisis, what happened? What happened is that all the system collapsed, and all the housing developments, those private housing developments, the construction company bankrupted. They didn't finish the housing complexes. And when I was there a month ago, residents that used to buy those houses with credit, they were in a hunger strike, trying to press in government to do something in order to have their houses back. So it's the same effect in a different context, a context where was very clear, and Kazakhstan policy oriented by the World Bank and oriented by European Development Bank was to reform their policies in order to promote a private market for housing. And they did exactly what they were told to do, and what they have now is a total collapse of the city, of the strategy, and of the housing. If we take the third example, which is the example of developing world, and I can refer to India, to Brazil, to Vietnam, to Cambodia, to Angola, to several cities where we can give you a lot of examples on that. What is the main difference is that in those contexts, and I can use the context of Brazil, which I know much more in a more deeper way, situation of the people inside the cities in terms of tenure arrangements has been always very ambiguous. Ambiguous in terms of nobody really knew about these informal settlements, if they were to stay or not, if they are transitional or not, if people can keep on living them or not, or they will be urbanized and integrated or not. So we are talking about the majority of the territory of the city being occupied in a very ambiguous way, which is quite functional, this ambiguous way, because in one way is the result of an absolute lack of housing as a social policy, of urban policies that addresses the poor. So the poor are just kicked, are left out of the city and have no alternative other than building by themselves on seized land or irregular parceling. So it's a wonderful way of maintaining wages very low. The housing cost is not part of the cost of living. The cost of a house is a cost that the family and the community must face with its own means. So all of that, this ambiguity, in one hand, is very functional to maintain a very high level of concentration of wealth in few hands, which is the prevalent model. And at the same time, and when we talk about democracy and countries that are democratic, so people that live in slums vote, the integration of slums, works in slums, urbanizing slums, investing in infrastructure, schools, and health has become, in this context, one of the main sources for voting. So integration into the city has been traded with votes and has become one of the main sources of power of the ruling elites that could at the same time maintain a very highly concentrated of power and wealth, and on the other hand to have the popular vote. But when it comes to open ground to build a world-class city, then it's very easy to displace those communities. And the reason to displace is because they don't have a properly registered property in their names. So communities that are there for 100 years sometimes are just kicked off and displaced like that. And we can see that in many, many places, in different contexts. We can see that in the context of post-disaster or post-conflict reconstruction. What's going on in Haiti today, for instance, the plan to reconstruct Haiti, which has more than 80% of the population in informal conditions regarding to land and land access, is a great danger of the seizure, the complete seizure of the land to very few hands involved in the reconstruction effort. So we can see that in cases like post-disaster reconstruction. We can see that also in New Orleans, in the battlefield of who gonna get what during the reconstruction. So you can see that as well. And you can see that so clearly also in Angola when it comes to invest oil money. The choice is not urbanizing the slums, but to evict them and using prime land to promote other type of development. And finally, just to finish this first